June 1911. Queen Mary enters Westminster Abbey, her presence a symphony of diamonds, where each legendary stone was not merely an adornment, but a meticulously encrypted message. We know her passion for jewels, but on that day, her choices were something more. It was the language of power, a statement of imperial grandeur, and, perhaps, something deeply personal. Not everything was as obvious as it first appeared. As we approach the significant anniversary of Queen Mary's coronation, we won't just reminisce about past splendor. We will delve into the secrets of Queen Mary's coronation ensemble. We will uncover what truly lay behind every diamond and why her choices continue to evoke admiration and debate to this day. This is the story of how one of the most iconic royal images was crafted by Queen Mary herself, a connoisseur, a strategist, and a true aficionado of jewels. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. So, picture this. It's June 1911. London is absolutely buzzing. There's this incredible sense of anticipation in the air for the coronation of King George V, and of course our Queen Mary. And you know, this wasn't just any coronation. It had a couple of really unique things about it that set it apart, both from what came before and in some ways what was to follow. For one, it was quite the international affair. Imagine Westminster Abbey filled not just with British nobility, but with representatives from all those grand old European empires, the Austro-Hungarians, the Russians, the Germans, the Ottomans. It was really the last time you'd see that kind of gathering on such a scale before the world changed quite dramatically in the years that followed. It gives you a sense of that particular moment in history, doesn't it? A snapshot of an era just on the cusp of enormous upheaval. And then there's something that, for us today, feels almost essential, but back then was quite groundbreaking. This was the very first British coronation to be officially photographed inside Westminster Abbey. A gentleman named Sir Benjamin Stone was given that rather important task. It means that Queen Mary's carefully chosen ensemble, every jewel, every detail, wouldn't just be described in words. It would be seen, preserved in a way previous Queen Consorts' coronation attire hadn't been. And that, I think, adds another layer to why her choices were so significant, knowing they'd be captured for posterity like never before. Now, all of this was happening against the backdrop of Britain at the height of its imperial power. The empire was vast, and the monarchy was this incredibly potent symbol of unity and continuity, not just for Britain itself, but for all those dominions and territories across the globe. So you can imagine the expectations resting on George and Mary. This coronation needed to be a spectacular display, a reaffirmation of that global standing. It wasn't just about tradition, though that was, of course, paramount. It was also about projecting an image of stability, of grandeur, of a monarchy that was very much at the heart of this sprawling empire. And that's the stage, really, upon which Queen Mary was about to present her own, very considered, and as we'll see, very personal vision of what a queen consort should look like in the 20th century. So, on that historic day, June 22nd, 1911, King George V and Queen Mary made their solemn journey to Westminster Abbey. The coronation service itself was conducted by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Randall Davidson, before a congregation of around 6,000 guests. It was a deeply symbolic and ancient ritual, reaffirming the monarch's sacred duties and his bond with the people. At the heart of this ceremony, of course, was King George V, and when we think of a British monarch being crowned, two principal crowns usually come to mind, both of which played their significant roles in 1911. First, there's the most sacred and historically resonant of them all, St. Edward's crown. This is the crown actually used for the precise moment of crowning. Its story is incredible, tracing its lineage back to the medieval crown of Edward the Confessor, though the original was destroyed during the interregnum. The St. Edward's crown we know today was made in 1661 for King Charles II. It's solid 22-karat gold, famously heavy, and adorned with hundreds of precious and semi-precious stones. For many years, this profoundly symbolic crown was carried in the coronation procession, but not actually worn by the monarch. King Edward VII, George's father, had intended to revive the tradition of being crowned with it, but illness prevented him from doing so at his own coronation. Thus, it was King George V in 1911 who truly brought St. Edward's crown back to its central, most sacred role, becoming the first monarch in over 2 centuries to be physically crowned with this historic emblem. A significant detail is that ahead of his coronation, the gemstones, which had previously been hired for each ceremony and then removed, were permanently fixed in place for the very first time. Then, there's the imperial state crown. This is perhaps the more familiar of the two, as it's the crown the monarch wears for the procession from Westminster Abbey after the service, and for other grand state occasions like the opening of Parliament. The specific imperial state crown King George V wore in 1911 was the one made for Queen Victoria in 1838. By 1911, it was a breathtaking showcase of history, featuring the famous Black Prince's ruby, actually a massive red spinel at the front. At the very top, in the uppermost cross, was St. Edward's sapphire, and the magnificent Cullinan II diamond, the second star of Africa, was prominently set at the front of the band, with the historic Stuart sapphire moved to the back to accommodate it. So, King George V left the abbey, wearing a crown that was a dazzling testament to the history and wealth of the royal collection. But while King George V was, naturally, the central figure of the day, adorned in these ancient and priceless symbols of sovereignty, our focus today, as you know, is on the remarkable woman by his side, Queen Mary. She, too, was about to be anointed and crowned, and the choices she made for her own regalia, her gown, and her jewels would create an equally powerful and lasting statement. So, with that grand stage set, an empire watching, history being made and photographed, how did Queen Mary choose to present herself? Well, as you might expect from a woman who understood symbolism and presentation so deeply, it started with the gown itself. It wasn't just a dress, it was a canvas, meticulously designed to carry not only its own powerful messages, but also to perfectly complement the extraordinary jewels she would wear. The commission for this all-important gown went to the London couture house of Reville and Rossiter, who were, by then, Queen Mary's trusted court dressmakers, and what they created was truly a masterpiece of patriotic and imperial symbolism. Imagine this. The gown was exquisitely embroidered with all the national emblems, the English rose, of course, the Scottish thistle, and the Irish shamrock. But it didn't stop there. To represent the wider empire, there were beautiful Indian lotus flowers and stars of India alongside oak leaves and acorns, another nod to England. Even the hem had this lovely wave-like border, designed to symbolize the oceans that connected all the disparate parts of the empire. Every stitch, it seems, was imbued with meaning, and interestingly, the very thread used for this elaborate embroidery was metallic. This choice, while ensuring a spectacular shimmer on the day itself, has led to the dress's somewhat tarnished appearance more than a century later, as the metal has naturally aged. It's fascinating to see how clothing itself could convey such a strong political and emotional statement even before a single diamond was added. And then, of course, there was the crown. This is where Queen Mary truly made her mark. And it's a story that really highlights her personal involvement and foresight. Now, for many years after the Restoration, Queen Consorts had traditionally worn the crown of Mary of Modena, first used in 1685. But by the 19th century, that crown was considered too theatrical and in poor condition. So, in 1831, a new crown was made for Queen Adelaide, using gems from her private collection. This essentially began a tradition where each subsequent queen consort had a bespoke crown created for her coronation. So, when it came to Queen Mary in 1911, the expectation was for a new commission, and true to form, Mary decided on a brand new one, and importantly, she funded its creation herself. This was her crown in every sense. The commission naturally went to the crown jewelers, Guard, who had the immense task of bringing her vision to life. The frame was crafted from silver and gold, a traditional choice, but it was absolutely encrusted with diamonds. Over 2,000 of them, can you imagine? And here's a fascinating little detail. You'll recall we mentioned that the St. Edward's crown, used for the king's crowning, is adorned with 444 gemstones but contains no diamonds at all. Queen Mary's crown, in stark contrast, was set entirely with diamonds. Talk about a sparkling balance between the king and queen, wouldn't you say? Her crown was designed to be both majestic and, in a way that's very typical of Mary, quite orderly in its splendor, though also somewhat unusual for a British crown with its 8 half-arches. But the real headline grabbers, the stones that truly defined this crown, were 3 of the world's most famous diamonds. At the very front, in the prominent cross-patee, was the Koh-i-Noor. Now, the Koh-i-Noor has such a long, and it must be said, very complex and controversial history. It came into British possession in the mid-19th century. In the late 1840s, the British East India Company waged war on the Sikh Empire in India. Following the conflict, the company annexed the Punjab region and compelled the 10-year-old Maharaja, Duleep Singh, to sign over his kingdom. 2 famous gemstones that had been in the young ruler's possession, the Timur ruby and the Koh-i-Noor diamond, were also ceded to the British. This handover remains incredibly contentious to this day, with some depicting it as a gift exchange, others interpreting it as a part of a military treaty negotiation, and still others arguing that it was outright theft. The British East India Company then took both stones and handed them over to Queen Victoria. The diamond was worn by Victoria and then by Queen Alexandra in her Coronation Crown, before Queen Mary chose it for her own. It would later be set into Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother's Coronation Crown in 1937, where it remains today, though it's unlikely to be worn in public again due to its status as a significant diplomatic flashpoint. For Britain in 1911, and for Queen Mary with her deep sense of history and dynastic pride, placing the Koh-i-Noor so centrally was an unambiguous symbol of imperial sovereignty, particularly underscoring the connection to India, the jewel in the crown of the empire. Then, set in the cross at the very top of the crown's mond, that globe-like feature was the pear-shaped Cullinan III, a magnificent diamond of 94.4 carats. And on the circlet's band, just below the Koh-i-Noor, was the square-cut Cullinan IV, a smaller, but still very impressive 63.6 carats. These 2 stones, as many of you will know, were cleaved from the original colossal Cullinan diamond, the largest gem-quality rough diamond ever found, which had been presented to King Edward VII. And here's a testament to Queen Mary's foresight. A few years after the coronation, in 1914, she had the arches made detachable, allowing the crown to be worn as an open circlet or diadem. More significantly, she signed over the ownership of this personally funded crown to the royal collection. Her hope, it's understood, was that it might be used by future queen consorts, perhaps establishing it as a new Mary of Modena's crown for the 20th century and beyond. And indeed, as many of you will have seen over a century later in 2023, this very crown, with some alterations including the removal of 4 of its 8 half-arches, and with the Cullinan V brooch replacing the Koh-i-Noor, was chosen by Queen Camilla for her coronation. It's quite something to think that Mary's wish, in that regard, eventually came to pass. Looking to the future, what are your thoughts? Would you like to see Queen Mary's historic crown continue to be used, perhaps one day by Catherine, the Princess of Wales, when her time comes? Or do you believe the tradition of creating a new bespoke crown for each queen consort should be revived? Let me know your opinions in the comments below. Now, while the crown was the dazzling new centerpiece, Queen Mary also wore some incredibly important, and by then, well-established pieces from the crown jewels, the Coronation Necklace and Earrings. These have a fascinating history of their own, born out of a rather significant loss for Queen Victoria. Back in 1858, following a long legal dispute, Queen Victoria was ordered to return a number of Hanoverian jewels to her German cousins. To replace some of what was lost, she commissioned Gard to create several new pieces, including a magnificent new diamond collet necklace and a matching pair of earrings. The diamonds for these, according to Sir Hugh Roberts, were taken from swords and useless things in the royal collection, a rather practical, if somewhat unromantic way to source such splendid gems. The necklace is composed of stunning collet-set diamonds with 9 particularly large stones forming its main body. The magnificent pendant, however, is a stone with its own rich story, the Lahore diamond. This impressive cushion-cut diamond of around 22 carats also originated from the Lahore treasury in the Punjab. And much like the Koh-i-Noor, which we discussed in detail earlier, the Lahore diamond came into Queen Victoria's possession following the events of 1849 and the annexation of the region. The royal collection describes it as being presented to Queen Victoria in 1851. Initially, this historic diamond was incorporated as part of the Timur ruby necklace, but it was cleverly converted so that it could also be used as a detachable pendant for this new diamond necklace. And true to her practical nature, Queen Mary, for her coronation, had Garrard shorten the necklace slightly, removing 2 stones. Now, what happened to those stones? Well, in his definitive book, The Queen's Diamonds, Sir Hugh Roberts notes that these 2 diamonds were then used to create a pair of solitaire earrings for her. And there's a strong suggestion that Queen Mary wore these very earrings on her coronation day. While she certainly had other diamond solitaire earrings in her collection, I personally tend to agree with this theory. It just seems so perfectly Queen Mary to immediately repurpose stones from such an important necklace for another key piece of her coronation ensemble. Beyond the spectacular necklaces and earrings, other significant jewels completed Queen Mary's coronation ensemble, each carrying its own historical weight. During the ceremony itself, Queen Mary would have been invested with the Queen Consorts coronation ring. This beautiful ring, featuring a bright pinkish-red ruby set in a cluster of diamonds with additional rubies in its gold band, was originally made for Queen Adelaide in 1831. Adelaide was the first to wear it, and since her time, every subsequent Queen Consort in Britain, Queen Alexandra in 1902, Queen Mary in 1911, and later Queen Elizabeth in 1937, has worn this very ring for her coronation. It's a powerful symbol of continuity, linking each Queen Consort to her predecessors. Adorning her wrists, Queen Mary wore a particularly splendid pair of bracelets. Each featured 4 rows of brilliant cut diamonds, impressively linked together by clasps that bore the royal ciphers of King William IV and Queen Adelaide, rendered in diamonds on a striking blue enamel background. These bracelets carried a direct historical connection to a previous king and queen consort, perfectly aligning with Queen Mary's deep appreciation for dynastic history. And Queen Mary, a true connoisseur of jewels, didn't stop there. Her coronation bodice was adorned with several significant diamond brooches, each with its own story and historical weight. One of the most prominent pieces pinned closest to her neckline was the impressive Diamond Cockade Brooch. This is a truly fascinating jewel, quite large, and thought to have originally been an ornament for a gentleman's cockade hat. It's described as a cockade set with brilliant diamonds, which was later altered, possibly for Queen Alexandra, into a 3-part cloak clasp. Queen Mary, for her coronation, wore this striking piece, likely in its full form, making a very grand statement. It's interesting to note that in more recent times, we've mostly seen only the central part of this ornament worn as a very large brooch by Queen Elizabeth II. But Queen Mary, with her love for substantial jewels, would certainly have appreciated its full impact. Its presence at her coronation links her to both Queen Victoria, who is believed to have designated it an heirloom of the crown, and to Queen Alexandra, who also wore it at her coronation. Then we know she wore the lovely Kensington Bow Brooch. This was actually a wedding gift to her back in 1893, presented by the people of Kensington. And that choice feels particularly personal, doesn't it? Because Kensington Palace wasn't just any royal residence for Mary. She had been born there and spent a good deal of her childhood within its walls. It's a rather touching detail, I think. The brooch itself features a beautiful diamond bow with a delicate pearl drop, a piece she was clearly very fond of, as she wore it on many important occasions throughout her life. Alongside it, she wore Queen Victoria's diamond bow brooches, that famous trio of bows that Victoria had commissioned in 1858 to replace the Hanoverian ones she'd lost. These are also heirlooms of the crown. Mary wore all 3, cascading them down her bodice, a style also favored by her mother-in-law, Queen Alexandra. And, of course, no discussion of Queen Mary's jewels would be complete without mentioning her signature style, what some have affectionately called her diamond turtleneck or diamond riviere look. She famously layered multiple diamond necklaces, creating this incredible cascade of brilliance from her chin to her chest. The Coronation Necklace, with its Lahore diamond pendant, formed the magnificent anchor at the base of this stack for her coronation. It was a look that was unmistakably Queen Mary, regal, opulent, and demonstrating an almost architectural approach to wearing jewelry. Once the solemn rites within Westminster Abbey were concluded, King George V and Queen Mary emerged, crowned and anointed, presenting their majestic image to the world. The official coronation portraits captured this moment, becoming iconic representations of early 20th century royalty. In these portraits, Queen Mary is the epitome of regal composure. Her new crown, with its historic diamonds, sits perfectly. The coronation necklace and earrings frame her face with brilliance, while her embroidered bodice, adorned with significant brooches like the Cockade, the Kensington Bow, and Queen Victoria's bows, speaks volumes. Her famous diamond riviere cascades down, a signature style elevated to a queenly standard. Every detail of her attire reflects tradition, imperial power, and her profound understanding of the Queen Consort's role. So, what stood behind every diamond Queen Mary wore in 1911? Each choice was indeed layered with meaning. Her self-funded crown, featuring the Koh-i-Noor and Cullinans, was a clear statement of Britain's imperial reach and her personal investment in the role. The inherited coronation, necklace and earrings signified continuity with Queen Victoria and the rebuilding of the royal collection. The brooches blended personal sentiment with dynastic history. Even her signature diamond cascade demonstrated meticulousness and a desire for perfectly ordered magnificence. Queen Mary didn't just wear jewels. She used them strategically, crafting a narrative of queenship that was both traditional and uniquely her own. Beyond her coronation ensemble, Queen Mary's overall influence on the royal collection was profound. Through meticulous cataloging, historically informed redesigns, and a passion for acquiring and understanding jewels, she actively curated and enhanced the collection, ensuring its treasures were preserved and appreciated for their full significance. Thus, looking back at Queen Mary at her 1911 coronation, we see more than just a queen adorned in diamonds. We see an intelligent woman of taste and historical understanding, using these magnificent objects to communicate power, tradition, personal identity, and the enduring spirit of the monarchy. Her legacy lies not just in the carats and settings, but in the understanding that these jewels are potent symbols and silent witnesses to history, carrying stories that continue to unfold. They are indeed much more than just sparkle. Thank you for joining me today as we've explored the stories behind Queen Mary's coronation image. I hope you found it as fascinating as I do. If you enjoyed this journey into royal history and jewels, please do consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories from the vaults. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think of Queen Mary's overall coronation look? And which particular piece from her ensemble captivates you the most?